Many of you have ever read Victor Hugo's novel Les Mis, or seen the movie. Maybe you've seen the movie, read the book, seen the movie. Okay, there is a famous quote from that book that it's probably the most quoted thing in that book, and it's kind of the message of the whole thing. The quote is, "To love another person is to see the face of God." To love another person is to see the face of God. So this, I wanted to stand up here and I wanted to say, I planned to say this obviously isn't Scripture, but it's a very biblical idea, and it is a very biblical idea, but it is actually also Scripture. And I did not realize this until last night. I don't know if Victor Hugo intended this or if he's using this from the Bible, and I didn't realize that this was the case, but in Genesis 33, when Esau and Jacob are reunited, remember Jacob cheated Esau out of his birthright, and for like 20 years, Jacob thought the next time Esau sees me, he's going to kill me. Okay? Well, they end up meeting up. They get back together. They have a reunion. Esau he loves his brother. They hug each other. It's a wonderful reunion. Okay, Esau does not want to kill his brother. It's a great reunion. And the text says something very similar to this. And in Genesis chapter 33, it says, "I've seen my brother's face, and I've seen the face of God." Okay, and basically that is the idea that Victor Hugo had in Les Mis. It's a very biblical idea. Throughout the Bible, the love of your neighbor is tied intimately to your love of God. The love of your neighbor is tied intimately to the love of God. In fact, John, in his first epistle, 1 John, he makes the point, if you can't love your neighbor, how are you going to love God? If you can't love your neighbor that's right in front of you, how are you going to love God that's invisible? All right, so there is an intimate relationship. And this is found all throughout Scripture. Leviticus 19 is full to the brim with commandments concerning the love of neighbor. And the theological reasoning behind all of them is, you shall fear your God, I am the Lord. In other words, loving your neighbor is essential to loving God. The reason that you should love your neighbor in this way in Leviticus chapter 19, which from there comes the famous verse, love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? The reason that you should love your neighbor in this way is because I'm the Lord. I'm the Lord your God. Connecting love of neighbor with love of God. If you remember the great judgment scene that Jesus describes in Matthew 25 about the sheep and the goats, and the Lord's sheep, those who are saved, are those who did good works toward others. Jesus said good works toward others were the same thing as doing good works toward Him. Love of neighbor and love of God. Now, this is a sermon series that we've been doing. They offered him gifts. This is a sermon series we've been doing about what are all the ways that we offer gifts of worship to God. Okay? I don't know about you. Many of you did not grow up in churches of Christ. We have it's probably 50-50 at this point in the church here. Many of you didn't grow up in churches of Christ, but I grew up in churches of Christ, and I grew up in a culture that believed, and this is because of the instrumental music issue, but I grew up in a culture that believed that worship of God did not exist outside of the worship hour on Sunday morning. And that was a belief that was made because there were people that wanted to say, you can't listen to Christian music outside of worship, okay, because that would be vain worship. Okay? There was this whole long argument that was made about it, and that's not the point of this lesson. But I came under the belief that worship only happened from 10:30 to 11:30. Well, here it's 10:30 to 12 because we're long-winded. But worship only happened during that hour. And no other time can you worship God. Okay, it's a bad teaching. It's not correct in my personal opinion. My study conviction, that's a bad teaching. There are examples of worship of God that are way beyond in our New Testament, that are way beyond just what we do in church. And so they offered him gifts is a series about how are we offering Him gifts of worship within our lives. And we've talked about a lot of different things, but today we're going to talk about how loving our neighbor or loving our brother, brotherly love, ultimately is a gift of worship to God. When we love our neighbor in the name of Jesus, we're loving, adoring, and worshiping God. That's the point I want to make today. How can you worship God this week? You can worship God this week by being kind and loving and good and merciful to someone else. That's how you can do that this week. Now, I want to do that from 1 Corinthians chapter 8. And this may seem weird. 1 Corinthians chapter 8 is about offering meat to idols. Okay? It's probably one of the least applicable passages in the New Testament for us. We live in a world where having temples that where there are physical idols that people bow down to and sacrifice animals to. That doesn't really happen. I mean, there are places in the world where you can experience that. Okay, so it may be the case that 1 Corinthians 8 seems like a very difficult to apply Bible passage, but I think that it's actually is very easy to apply a principle. It's not really about sacrificing meat to idols. It is really about teaching us how to love one another and love our neighbor. So, without further ado, turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 8. We're going to look at all 13 verses. And we're going to, in the first place, learn something very important about knowledge in verses 1 through 3. So, y'all get your Bibles? Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1. Now, concerning food offered to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge. This knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. If anyone imagines that he knows something, he does not yet know as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, he is known by God. I can't tell you enough how important these three verses are for us. I cannot tell you how important these three verses are for us, because it is extremely easy for someone who knows their Bible well to become puffed up because they have that knowledge. All you got to do is go on the internet, go on Facebook, and go to a religious discussion group on Facebook. Are you all in any of those? Okay, so here, I'm going to tell you the truth. I have all of you unfollowed on Facebook. Every one of you. I don't see, Kristen, she's not in here, she's upstairs. Kristen's the only person I see post on Facebook. Okay, unless you tag me in something, I do not see what you say. All right, the reason for that is I just don't really want to see what everybody says. Okay, I don't want to have to deal with all that. I don't want to see what everybody says. I don't see what any of you say. But what I do on Facebook is I am in religious discussion groups, which is probably just as bad as if I hadn't unfollowed everybody. Okay? But you go into a religious discussion group on Facebook, and verses 1 through 3 is put on perfectly. I know this thing, he doesn't know this thing, I'm right, he's wrong. I'm a real Christian, he's not. That is exactly to a T what Paul is talking about. Just because you know something, just because you have knowledge, doesn't mean that you get to use it as a way to elevate yourself against someone else. He even makes the point. If anyone imagines that he knows something, he does not yet know as he ought to know. You might be the most knowledgeable person in the world, and yet there's something that you don't know that you ought to know. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Love builds up. Now, this is important to his next point. There's a bit of knowledge that most Christians during this day possessed. Notice verse 4. Therefore, as to the eating of food offered to idols, we know, okay, this is what most people know. We know that an idol has no real existence and that there is no God but one. For although there may be so-called gods in heaven and on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is one God, the Father, from whom are all things and for whom we exist, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom are all things and through whom we exist. There's the bit of knowledge. Is that an important bit of knowledge? Yeah, that's an important bit of knowledge. That there is one true and living God, that there is the Most High God, Yahweh. And He is the true God. And that anything else is beneath Him. Anything else is inconsequential. Most people know that. And so the point is, most people know that when meat is sacrificed to an idol, they're just sacrificing meat to an idol. Okay? Something that was fashioned by the hands of men. That's all they're doing. What he's saying is, most people know that. Most Christians know that. I would imagine that everybody in this room, if you have been coming to church for any time at all, you know that. We serve the one true and living God. Most Christians know that. That's an important thing to know. A very important thing to know. Most people possess that knowledge. But I want you to notice in the third place, the struggle of those who do not have that same knowledge. The struggle of those who do not have that same knowledge. Verse 7, however, not all possess this knowledge. In other words, this obviously important point, is it obvious and is it important for us to understand that God, the God of heaven, is the Most High God? Is that important for us to understand? Yeah, absolutely. That's obvious. It's important for us to understand that. But just because someone else doesn't understand that, does that mean that we puff ourselves up against them and think that we're better than them because we know it and they don't? Now, obviously, this is about meat sacrifice to idols. It's not something that we're super concerned with today, okay? In our context, it's not something we're super concerned with. If we were in a different country where there were still pagan sacrifices being offered, that might be an issue. But it's not that huge of an issue today. But take this and translate it to an issue that is a huge issue. What's something that you say, yeah, I know about that. That's true. This is the truth. This is right. This is the truth, that you have held against someone and said, well, they don't understand this, and maybe they're not a real Christian because they don't understand it. I can tell you, I haven't been a Christian for that long. 20-something years, 22, 23 years, I think I've been a Christian. I've been preaching for 15 years. There are so many instances where I've been guilty of being puffed up by knowledge and not building up through love. So many instances. I'm right, you're wrong, I'm a real Christian, you're not. I may not say it in those uncertain terms, but that's the underlying understanding. Y'all, 1 Corinthians chapter 8 is insanely and incredibly important. Especially for a church that historically has prided itself on being people of the book, right? You've heard the old joke, well, if we ever lost the Bible, we'd just go find a member of the Church of Christ and he would write it down for us from memory. Well, probably not, okay? If we're being honest, probably not. That's not going to happen. There may be someone that can do that. But that's the history, okay? That's the underlying history behind us. And guys, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Love builds up. All right, continuing on. However, not all possess this knowledge. But some, through former associations with idols, eat food as really offered to an idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. Food will not commend us to God. We are no worse off if we do not eat, and no better off if we do. But take care that this right of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone sees you have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will he not be encouraged if his conscience is weak, to eat food offered to idols? And so by your knowledge this weak person is destroyed? The brother for whom Christ died? Thus, sinning against your brothers and wounding their conscience when it is weak, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. All right, there it is. There it is. So what do we learn about love from this passage? What do we learn about love from this passage? I want to bring you a couple points of application today for you to take with you. Number one. We're going to make two main points. Number one, if knowledge you have keeps you from loving others, okay? If knowledge you have keeps you from loving others, then you've missed the mark in loving God, actually. That's what the text says. You've missed the mark of loving God. Notice verse 3, but if anyone loves God, he is known by God. If knowledge you have keeps you from loving others, then you've missed the mark in loving God, because it's not about knowing a lot, but rather it's about being known by God. It's not about how much you know about God, it's about whether or not He knows you. Let me give you an illustration. From what I understand, I've referenced Lee Bedingfield in like 3 sermons in a row. I'm not going to reference him today, but he would like this if he were here. He would like this if he were here. Okay, I can probably, and so you're gonna laugh at me whenever I give you this illustration. I can probably tell you every movie that Leonardo DiCaprio has acted in. Okay, I know. You're like, really, that guy? Okay, look, I get it. You know, it's weird, it's frou-frou, but dude's a great actor. Okay, I mean, I'm just gonna say it. He's great. Okay, I could probably tell you every movie that Leonardo DiCaprio has been in. I've probably watched all of them because I think that he's a great actor. And I enjoy his movies for the most part. I know a lot about him. But guess what? Leonardo DiCaprio has no clue who I am. And he never will have any clue who I am. I am nobody to him. We can puff ourselves up with knowledge about God. But if God doesn't know us, we haven't truly loved Him. We haven't truly loved Him. And if we loved Him, then we'd know what He expects about loving others. If we loved Him, we'd know what He expects about loving others. I wish that we could spend more time on this point. If our knowledge of God and God's Word becomes something that we use to hurt other people, we've missed it. We've missed it. Or if it becomes something that we use to neglect other people, we've missed it. We've missed it. Point number 2. And I hope you can follow my train of thought here. Okay, I'm going to make several different thoughts within point number 2. Love of others is more important than your personal rights. That's what this text teaches. Love of others is more important than your personal rights. I don't know any other way to say it. We live in a world, we live in Western society where your personal rights are king. They're number one, right? They're the most important thing. My personal rights. I have my rights, okay? That's the number one thing. And honestly, I wouldn't want to live in a society that doesn't elevate personal rights, okay? I love that I live here. But religiously speaking, in Christ, if we're followers of Jesus, our personal rights do not supersede our love of someone else. That's what this text taught. That's what this text teaches. Our personal rights do not supersede the love that we ought to have for someone else. Okay? This is, point number 2 within this is precisely the case because Christ died for them. This is precisely the case because Christ died for them. Okay? You cannot elevate your rights over the well-being of someone else in Christ because Christ didn't just die for you. Who else did he die for? Everybody. That's right, Lydia. He died for them too. He died for them too. Christ places equal importance on them and on you. In his eyes, you're not better than that person. We may think we're better in our eyes, but in Christ's eyes, we're not. He died for them. He died for them. Notice verse 11, and so by your knowledge this weak person is destroyed, the brother for whom Christ died. He died for them. Number 3, a sin against another is ultimately a sin against Christ. A sin against another is ultimately a sin against Christ. Verse 12, thus sinning against your brothers and wounding their conscience when it is weak, you sin against Christ. If we, before we spoke mean to someone, could look that person in the face and see Christ's face instead of their face, do you think we might take pause before we spoke meanly to them? Because what this text is teaching me is to sin against another person ultimately is to sin against Christ. To love another is to see the face of God. And so, let us state the opposite. To sin against another is ultimately a sin against Christ, so to state in reverse, to love another is ultimately, for the Christian, to love Christ. To love another is ultimately, for the Christian, to love Christ. And so I call on you today, and this week, and next week, and the week after that, to love and adore Christ by speaking kindly to your spouse and to your children. Okay? Speaking kindly to your spouse and to your children. Don't wait until February 14th to do it. Okay? All right? Speak kindly to your spouse and to your children, because when you do that in the name of Christ, guess what? You're doing that to Christ. Today, love and adore Christ by treating the wait staff well when you go out to eat. We could put anything in this blank. Treat the wait staff well when you go out to eat. Today, love and adore Christ by being long-suffering with your coworker. You know, that person that just really gets underneath your skin, that drives you nuts, that makes you want to pull your hair out if you had any hair. Okay, I'm speaking for myself here. That coworker that just really gets under your skin, be long-suffering with them. And worship Christ this week. Today, love and adore Christ by standing up for the kid who's bullied. Those of you who are in school. Anybody mean in your class? Stand up for the person they're mean to. Okay? And love and adore Christ. Today, love and adore Christ by, shameless plug, signing up to help with Branches of Hope. Okay? We're going to feed Branches of Hope next Saturday, and we're going to feed the people that are there. Love and adore Christ by signing up to feed the people who stay the night at Branches of Hope this coming Saturday. Today, love and adore Christ by holding the door for the older gentleman, by returning your cart to the cart return. Please, love your neighbor as yourself, and love Jesus by returning the cart to the cart return. Don't leave it in the middle of the parking lot. Love and adore Christ today. Get a little bit more serious here. By seeing the political opposition as broken images of God, just like you, and not the enemy. love and adore Christ and worship Him today by reconciling with those that you've hurt in the past. And maybe love and adore Christ today by searching for opportunities to help others who are in need. Searching for opportunities to help others who are in need. We could go all day with a list. That's not the point. You can make your own list in your mind. The point is, when we mistreat someone who is made in the image of Christ, albeit a broken image, when we mistreat them, we're mistreating Christ. When we love them, we're loving Christ. And we're adoring Him. And I think that the Lord loves to hear the praises of Him sung by watching you love the people around you. Now, let us give you an opportunity as we conclude today to love you. We've been worshiping God this morning. We've been singing praises. We've been taking communion together. Let us worship God one more time this morning by praying for you and praying with you. If you need something today, we'd love to sit down and pray with you. Let us worship God one more time today by studying the Bible with you. If you want to study the Bible and learn what it means to be a Christian and to be a follower of Jesus and what God requires of you to be His follower, let's sit down and do that today. Let's worship God today in those ways. We want to love you as Christ loves you. We'll never be able to love you as much as Christ loves you, but we can try. If you need something, don't hesitate. Come now as we stand and as we sing.